welcome back to Prompt Circle, where we discuss AI use cases. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the newly released ChatGPT plugins. According to OpenAI, plugins are tools that are designed specifically for large language models. Based on the description of the tool, GPT is able to use the tool whenever needed to solve specific problems. As an example, if we needed to summarize a breaking news article, we can use a plugin to retrieve the news from whatever website where the news was published. Then we can use GPT to summarize it. There are a few examples of plugins that have actually been released by OpenAI more recently, or at least been published by OpenAI. Those include Expedia, Instacart, Kayak, and so on. One of my favorites actually is the Zapier plugin, which allows you to connect more than 5,000 applications that it already connects to. This means you'll be able to use ChatGPT to look up a record in Salesforce, send an email, update a Google Sheet row, and more of such capabilities. So let's take a look at how this plugin actually works. So I'm just going to go into ChatGPT here, and I'm going to create a new chat. Now you have to select the plugins alpha. This would be available to you if you have been granted access to ChatGPT plugins. If not, you can also always go and join the waitlist to get access to the plugins. So from here on out, you can go to the plugin store, and from the plugin store you can choose what plugin you want to use. So since we want to do Expedia, so let's go ahead and install the Expedia application. Once we're done with that, we have Expedia right now. So now Expedia is activated. I think you can activate up to 3 plugins at any given time. So now if I were to provide a prompt for something like planning a vacation to Montreal for the 15th and 16th of April, what are some good priced hotel options? Now, once we do that, you would notice that ChatGPT would attempt to use Expedia to solve this particular problem. So it's currently trying to use Expedia to obtain that information. And right from here, you could see that it's beginning to provide us with information from the Expedia website related to the specific hotel options that I have selected for. So this means that it's actually pulling all of this information directly from Expedia through the plugin, and I'll be showing you with an example how it's actually doing this behind the scenes. So there you go, it provides us with different options, and now you can select the option that you want and you can go ahead and book your stay. Now if I actually said that I wanted to book a reservation as well, it would do the same thing. Now these plugins are very, very powerful because they give ChatGPT the ability to perform like the real world tasks, the everyday tasks that we do. And today I'm going to be showing you how to use a ChatGPT plugin to send a Slack message into a channel. So let's first take a look at what this would look like. Alright, just to start off, the first thing you need to do is to create a new chat in your ChatGPT. You need to be on ChatGPT Plus, and you also need access to the plugins feature. You can get this by joining the waiting list. Okay, so now we're in our plugins and we have our Slack plugin right here. So this is our Slack message sender, and we're going to have it activated. So here, all we need to do is send a simple message. So I'm just going to say generate a short announcement about Taco Tuesday and send this as a Slack message. So we're going to do that. Now here, ChatGPT is going to simply identify that it needs to send a Slack message. It's going to attempt to send the Slack message as you have seen. And on the side here in our Slack message, attention taco lovers, we're excited to announce that Taco Tuesday is back. As you can see, this is just simply generating text and using the plugin as a tool to send that text to somewhere else. Plugins are mind-blowing and are probably one of the biggest releases that we've seen. So let's take a look at how to actually build this. All right, so let's explore what plugins are actually made of. So typically plugins are made up of 3 core files. One is a plugin manifest. The plugin manifest essentially contains information about the plugin, so the metadata about your plugin. So that would be things like the name of the plugin, a description both for your human users, which are the people who are going to be using your plugins on ChatGPT, as well as a description for the model. Now remember, the model uses the description for the model to understand if this tool or plugin is going to be used in solving a particular task. So it is very important that the description for the model is properly defined in a way that is explicit, so that it can be used properly. Some information has been defined here in terms of how to define good descriptions. So be sure to go to the OpenAI documentation to learn more about that. The next file we need is the core application file. So this could be a Flask application which contains routes to your specific API endpoints. So in our case, for instance, it's going to be like a Slack send message endpoint, which just basically sends a message to Slack. It also includes endpoints to access this manifest, as well as the Open API specification. Now the Open API specification is essentially a YAML file that defines what your API actually does. It defines it in a way that makes it very, very clear and easy for the model to understand how to use your API. So basically, think about it as the documentation for your API that the model is going to be looking at. So those are the files you'll be needing to create a plugin. All right, so let's go ahead and build out our plugin. So you can use any code editor for this, including Visual Studio or any other one like Replit that you might be interested in. For me, I'm going to be using GitHub Code Spaces. This is essentially Visual Studio Code in the cloud. And I've also added like a GitHub repository that includes all these files, so you can essentially go ahead and clone the repository and use as needed. So I'm going to start by creating a new code space. So to do that, I can just go ahead and say get started for free here. And you can select what template you want to use. In this case, I'm just going to be using a blank template here. So I'm going to use this template, and this is going to create a code space for you. So the first thing we're going to be creating here is going to be our manifest file, and our manifest file here is going to be called, so I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it AI plugin.json. I'm just going to paste in the manifest because I've already written it out, but then we can go ahead and step through it. So first off, we have a schema version. This is version 1. We have the name of the plugin, which says Slack message sender. We have the name for the model, which is Slack_sender. We have a description for humans. So this is what the ChatGPT user is going to see. And we also have a description for the model. Here we're saying plugin for sending messages to Slack via a webhook. So the approach we're going to be taking is to use a webhook when we're sending the message. Now, we're also describing that there is no authentication required. So you can also have, your APIs that might require authentication. In this case, our API is not going to require authentication because we're just going to use a simple Slack webhook for this. So under the API, we're defining that we are using the OpenAPI standard, and we're defining the actual location of our OpenAPI YAML specification. Now, we haven't created this file yet, so we're going to change this URL once we're done to make sure that it is referencing the right file. We also indicated that it's not user authenticated. And then there's a logo URL for your logo. I'm just using just a logo from Wikipedia here. And then you have a contact email as well as your info URL. So be sure to check the documentation for a full list of all the attributes that you can use. But this is a good place to get started. All right. So now to actually send Slack messages to a particular channel, we're going to be using a webhook. Now, obviously, we can use other ways of sending this by creating like methods that actually call the chat.post message endpoint on Slack. But this is just more so to illustrate the capabilities of plugins. So we're just going to be using a very simple way of posting a message into a channel, which is through a webhook. So first, we need to create a channel. So I'm just going to call this channel ChatGPT Plugin, and essentially this channel is just going to be there to receive our messages from the plugin. So go ahead and create this. Now, once you're done creating the particular channel, we can now go ahead and create our app so that we can obtain the actual webhook URL. So to do that, we go ahead and create a new app. We're going to call this app ChatGPT Plugins, and we're going to install into our workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and create an app. And now all we really need to do here is to go into our incoming webhooks and essentially create a new incoming webhook. Okay, so all we need to do is turn this on. And once we turn this on, we can now add a new webhook to the workspace. So click on add new webhook to the workspace. And now we have to select a channel that we want to be sending information to. So we created a new channel called ChatGPT Plugin. So we want to select that particular channel and click allow. So this is just simply going to generate a webhook URL, which we're going to be using for our app. So we're just simply going to send a message payload to this particular URL. Now be sure to keep this URL safe. So I'm just going to copy the URL and use that inside our app. So we'll go back to code spaces. And inside code spaces, let's create a new file called .env. And inside our .env file, let's actually save our Slack webhook URL. So just say Slack webhook URL is equals to this. So we're going to be using this inside our app. Next up, let's go ahead and create a new app file. So call it app.py. And in here, we're going to be having our entire code. Now, I've already written the vast majority of the code. So I'm just going to paste it in there, and then we're going to step through exactly what's going on. So I'm just going to paste it in here. And also, I have a requirements documentation, which contains information about all the libraries that we're using here. So requirements.py.txt, I should say. And let's also get all of those libraries right in here. So we have HTTPX, Qt, Qt cores, and then Python.ev. And so those are the only things that we're going to be using here. So first and foremost, we want to go ahead and pip install everything from our requirements .txt file. Okay, so that goes ahead and installs all the stuff that we need. Okay, so now we have all of our libraries installed. Let's actually step through what's actually going on here. So first and foremost, we need to set up cores to ensure that chat.openai.com is allowed to access this particular API endpoint. So we're going to be using Quart to do this. So Quart cores allows you to set up your cross-origin sites, and in this case we're setting up chat.openai.com here. Now I want to set up our Slack webhook URL, so which we stored inside our environment as an environment variable, and now we're creating a route to actually handle our the posting of a Slack message. The name of our route here is called send Slack message, and slash the dynamic value which we're going to be passing in. We're essentially asking ChatGPT to pass that message in here, and then we define our function as follows. So send Slack message, we pass a message as the attribute or as a parameter. We define our header, which is basically content type application/JSON. Then we pass the actual message itself that we want to send to Slack. All right, so here we have our response set up. So we use the post method to actually hit that webhook URL. So we're sending across the JSON data as well as our header, and then we're also checking to see what the response status code is. If it is a 200, we want to respond with OK and a status of 200. If not, we want to say it failed to send the message to Slack, and we'll want to set the status to whatever response status code that we receive. So these two functions or routes are needed for every single plugin that you create. OpenAI have defined them as ways to actually receive information for these two specific files. So this is a way to show them exactly where these files are so that you can use it. Now we haven't added our slack-openapi.yaml file, so let's go ahead and do that. So we want to add a new file, and we're going to call it Slack OpenAPI.yaml. So this will contain all the information about our API. If you're not aware of the Open API standard, please do check it on their website. I'm going to add a link in the description as well, so you can see the definition for the Open API standards, which you can use definitely in defining or explaining your APIs. So I have already gone ahead and written this out, so I'm just going to paste it here, and then we can walk through exactly what's going on. So OpenAPI 3.0.1 is the version that we're using, and the information here is basically about our app. So it starts with the title, which says the Slack message sender. It describes exactly what the app does, and it goes in to talk about the actual routes that we're going to be using, and exactly what it's going to be doing. So an operation ID, which indicates what's going to be happening, send Slack message, a summary of what's going on, and a few parameters, including, like, for instance, the message, which is something that we're going to be passing through, and we're indicating that this particular parameter is going to be required. So this is going to help ChatGPT to understand exactly how to make a call to our endpoint. So this is actually very, very necessary and important that it's filled out correctly. You also see what type of responses can be expected, 200 indicating that this is an okay or successful response, and describing exactly what that response is going to look like, as well as what the 400 response is going to look like as well. Now, if you have multiple routes, you can also add those routes in here, so you can go in and just add the additional routes as needed. But this is exactly what we need. Now, one of this is actually empty. The URL is empty, so our server is actually empty, and that's because we haven't actually generated it. Now, to generate your server, what we need to do is to go back to app.py, and we're going to run app.py to get our URL. So to run app.py, we'll go to our terminal. I'm just going to clear this out, and we're going to say Python 3 app.py. And this should run our server. So you can see our server is now open. Now, because our server is now running, also CodeSpaces generates a URL from their port. So you see we're running at 5002 here. So one thing that we can do very quickly is to make this port public, so that allows ChatGPT to access it. And then we're going to go ahead and also copy the local address, because we're going to be using that local address in a few places. First, we want to go to our AI plugin.json, and we want to update this URL to our new URL. So right here, rather than having example.com, we want to update this to have the right server URL, so you can access our OpenAI spec. So we want to do that. So that's one. I just need to remove one more slash. So this is okay. So this is basically what is pointing to our Slack open API.yaml. And also in the Slack open API.yaml, we have a server URL here, which we need to update. So again, we want to paste in our server URL here. So this should be good to go now. I think we have everything correctly written. So the next step would be to go ahead into ChatGPT to add our plugin. So to do that, let's go to ChatGPT, and let us go ahead and use our plugins model in doing this. Now here, what we need to do is to go into the plugin store, and inside the plugin store, we need to go to develop your own plugin. And in here, you're expected to add the domain of your plugin. So right here, I'm just going to paste in the domain of my plugin, and then you can hit the find manifest file. So OpenAI is just essentially going to hit that endpoint. As you can see, it hit the endpoint, it validated the manifest, validated the Open API spec, so everything is looking good. So it was able to capture that. It was also able to capture our Open API spec. Our logo is not looking that great, but that is fine. We're just going to use it, and you can see the name also is coming in, as well as the description. And then we can go ahead and hit next, and then install for me. So now it's giving you this unverified plugin. So this means that it's not going to be public. So this is just for your own personal use. I believe that at the time of recording, OpenAI mentions that you can grant up to 15 people access to this. So just go ahead and hit continue, and then install plugin. Now we have our Slack message sender application right here. And now we can do some interesting things. So first and foremost, let's make sure that our app actually works. So I'm just going to say generate a short poem and send that to Slack. So let's just see if it works here. So first we're going to see that it's going to generate a poem. So it generates the poem, and now it's going to send this message actually into Slack. So we see here it has actually been sent to Slack, and we can go into Slack and see that we now have our poem coming in here right into our Slack. All right, so let's see how we can combine two plugins. So I have the shop plugin here along with our Slack message sender, and we're going to be trying out this prompt. Get the product description of a Garmin watch, use the description to craft an ad, and send the ad via Slack. Do not add question marks as they seem to truncate Slack text. Now, I noticed that whenever question marks were in the text, there was some kind of truncation happening. So I'm just trying to amend that through my prompt. So let's go ahead and send that message and see what happens. So here, it's going to attempt to use the shop to obtain the name of the watch, and then it's going to generate a quick product description slash ad. So it's providing an ad, and then using that information to post this ad that it has now received into Slack. So as we can see here, it is able to generate this information and provide it to us in Slack. So think about how much of your creativity is going to exponentially increase when you can combine these various plugins with the tools that you already use to get all the power of ChatGPT embedded into your own systems. I'm really excited for plugins. I'm making more videos about plugins as well, showing different ways that you can use them currently, even with the tools that are currently available. I think there's going to be an explosion of plugins in the market, so it would be something that is nice for you to learn, to have that skill, and also learn how to use them to increase your productivity. Until next time, I'm looking forward to seeing what you build, and talk to you again. Bye.